Hello, Stargazers. This is Christopher from Sun Ra Archive, coming at you live with another video. I'm 2 weeks in to staying at home, full-time, working from home. Thankful to say my family is healthy. Been spending a lot of time listening to Sun Ra. And I want to finish up today's video with where we left off my last video. So, Sun Ra's Cosmic Corner in the house. Shout out on the Spaceways to Richard Segan. My last video, which was about where to start as a Sun Ra beginner buying vinyl, in the context of all the great reissues that are out now, the last 10 or 12 to 15 minutes of the video cut out. So I'm going to try and keep it a little shorter this time and pay attention to my connection. But conveniently, where the video cut off was right at the end of the review of Cosmic Myth Records re-releases. And all of the discussion that I gave around Modern Harmonic and Art Yard was cut off. So I'm going to finish up just by, giving some recognition to Modern Harmonic and Art Yard Records from the perspective of a newbie getting into Sun Ra and looking for some vinyl records to buy. Hey Matthew, my new friend, who I've been talking back and forth with all day today via text about the main subject of today's video, which is going to be Song of the Stargazers, the Cosmo Mystery album. But I want to make sure that I finish up the last video and just give props to the great work that's happening right now as far as Sun Ra reissues. The first one I got to give recognition to, and this is a little selfish, is Thunder of the Gods, which features mid to late 60s unreleased recordings that I was fortunate enough to be asked to do the liner notes for, and I have to give my thanks and gratitude to Jay Millar and Bob Irwin from Sundays to Modern Harmonic. It is an incredible honor to have my name on the same piece of cardboard as the Sun Ra Arkestra. Definitely a highlight of my Sun Ra fandom. Great record, regardless of the incredibly insightful liner notes on very beautiful, kind of smoky, gray, speckled vinyl. Fantastic previously unreleased recordings. Probably not for a newbie unless the mid-60s free jazz period is what you're into. But the ones I want to talk about, Modern Harmonic does beautiful reissues on both CD and vinyl, available digitally, lossless and lossy formats as well via Bandcamp and all the places you get your music online. But they've done a great series of reissues of albums that were originally released as part of Sun Ra's early to mid 70s ABC Impulse deal, in which ABC Impulse re-released a bunch of Saturn albums that were quote-unquote remastered, but also given new cover art, really cool, funky 70s Afro futuristic covers. But so this is what Modern Harmonic has been re-releasing. So we've got Astro Black here, which was the first issue on ABC Impulse of new material that wasn't Saturn re-release. This was recorded for the ABC Impulse deal. This artwork is new and inspired by the ABC Impulse look, but is not a replication of that. Fantastic studio record, definitely more on the 70s outside synth and horn oriented tip. The next one that they put out does feature a reprint of the original ABC Impulse artwork. This is another one that was recorded for that deal, Pathways to Unknown Worlds. Again, longer compositions. This one features 3, 2 on one side, 1 on the other, of prime early to mid 70s studio orchestra material. The next one was recorded and slated to be released as part of the Impulse deal, but didn't come out at the time. Apparently, the Sun Ra records did not sell into the gold and platinum quantities that ABC Impulse anticipated, so this studio record was shelved, and it didn't come out until the mid-90s, when Evidence paired it with Crystal Spears and reissued it as the Great Lost Sun Ra albums. That was the first time it appeared in print, and Modern Harmonic has now issued it on vinyl and CD. Beautiful cover with a photo of the era that I believe was originally on a promotional poster for the ABC reissue program, Crystal Spears. Again, this features 4 tunes, 3 on one side, 1 long composition. Sunrise in the Western Sky on the B side, and this is, again, you know, progressive 70s synth orchestra. And then I'm going to finish it off as far as the ABC Impulse era. Modern Harmonic released a 2 disc and 2 CD and 2 LP version of Symbols, which again was recorded for the ABC Impulse deal in the 70s, but not released at that time. And it's come out now. It was recorded in New York, 73. I believe this is a Variety recording studio session. Excellent sound, and again, very similar in tone and style to the other. And then from a beginner standpoint, this cannot be recommended enough. The Space Angel Goddess herself, June Tyson, has received a compilation of all of her vocal features here from Modern Harmonic. This is called June Tyson, Saturnian Queen of the Sun Ra Arkestra. And June Tyson had a beautiful, smooth, sonorous, soothing voice, and this is a great compliment towards the compilations I talked about in the other video if you're a starter. But you could not go wrong, you know, kind of beginning in this area. June is one of the easiest, most comforting things to listen to about the orchestra. So that kind of wraps up my beginners recommendations. If you're getting into Sun Ra and you want to sample the easily available in-print vinyl without paying the high collector's prices for the original Saturns and even now Impulses, but all presented with the best possible sound quality that we've ever heard, lovingly mastered and cut to vinyl with beautiful packaging and presentation, and perhaps most importantly, fully sanctioned and endorsed in conjunction with the Sun Ra LLC, the Sun Ra estate. And then honorable mention here, I'm not going to go into Art Yard Strut releases too much right now, because this is based on kind of recommendations for a beginner. And Art Yard and Strut, other than the 2 compilations that I mentioned in the previous video and this one, the Sun Ra singles, kind of focus on more choices for seasoned Sun Ra fans. So maybe some more obscure live releases, etc. But I want to give a shout out from a beginner standpoint to the Sun Ra singles, which they have released here across two LP versions on vinyl, and they're beautifully pressed, really quiet. It's the best probably I've ever heard these recordings sound. I favor the warmth of analog, and it just so happens the room that I have my turntable set up in has a real nice sweet spot, and so a lot of these recordings are in mono, and when you spin the record and get it at the right volume and you get in the right spot and close your eyes, with these records you feel like you're sitting in the room with the Arkestra, and it's really a beautiful transportational experience. But from a beginner standpoint, these Sun Ra singles on Art Yard, I believe it amounts to somewhere around 90 songs in total across 4 records, 2 different sets, is a great overview from the very beginning to the later years of Sun Ra. So I want to make sure that I finished up and recognized Modern Harmonic and Art Yard Strut to complement the previous video about Cosmic Myth Records. And then on a from a non-vinyl standpoint, and again, this was spurred on by a question on the Sun Ra Appreciation Society Facebook page by someone who was new to Sun Ra, asking for recommendations, and the weirder the better. Another great place to start. Some of the keywords that they used were tribal, voodoo-y, percussion-based, maybe funky, and I think that this is a great complement to start. They've been re-released digitally by Sun Ra LC and are available on iTunes and Bandcamp, etc. But these 2 CDs from the 90s are a great entry point if kind of you want a cross-section of a lot of the things that the Arkestra did, meaning instrumental, meaning vocal chants, meaning heavily composed, synchronized big band work, along with free improvisations, collective improvisations. These 2 records have it all, and were recorded in the same period. Even though they're both called Space is the Place, they are 2 different records. This one is the Space is the Place soundtrack from Evidence, which is a companion to the film Space is the Place, and then this Impulse record, Space is the Place, is a studio session from Streeterville Studios in Chicago that also features the song Space is the Place, but is completely different from this one. So recommendations on where to start. All right, so this is going to get us into the meat of today's discussion. Probably not a great word. But that is the mystery album Song of the Stargazers. So we're going to go from, the beginner's guide into the deep, dark cosmo mystery of the collector's realm, the longtime fans' realm, which is where Song of the Stargazers fits in to the discography. And I just want to give thanks to Matthew, who I had a wonderful discussion with today about this. I wish that we had the ability to do a co-present, because I think we have 2 reflections of the same pool on this one, and it would be really interesting to have that discussion. And I really wish these videos could be roundtable based, because again, I'm not an expert, I'm a fan, and we're learning, but that's part of what I'm trying to share here, is just the joy of being a fan and sharing the journey. So let's get to it. Song of the Stargazers. Get this rolling here. And again, forgive me, this is Basement Tapes, pirate radio content, but now's the time to do it, since we're all at home right now. Peter, thank you and welcome. Thank you sincerely for everything that you do. Just gave a shout out to Art Yard and Strut, and we'll continue to do so. And please keep up the great work. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. Song of the Stargazers. So this is gonna be a research session. I don't have anything scripted. This is not all off the top of my head. So we're gonna walk through this together. And we'll get Song of the Stargazers going in the background here. So we're going to start with Tillman Stahl's 1983 discography of Sun Ra, which I am fortunate enough to have a copy of, thanks to my Sun Ra mentor and dear friend Richard Segan. I believe this came out around 1983, and I believe was the first printed discography, attempted a printed discography of Sun Ra. And it appears that, try and show you here, it appears that this is, homemade production from Tillman. Kind of off-the-shelf materials. Printed on probably a small made-to-order scale. But it's nonetheless a magical and fascinating book to have and to hold because, we, as Sun Ra fans, owe a great debt of gratitude, or at least I feel this personally as a Sun Ra student, great debt of gratitude to the people that have come before and done the really hard work to get us to the state of enlightenment that we're at now, which in a lot of ways, I think, from a Sun Ra knowledge standpoint, we're kind of in the golden age as far as availability of recordings and books and knowledge, but I think, quite honestly, we really have only begun to scratch the surface. There's tons more to know. So Tillman Stahl, if you've, read Omniverse by Hartmut Gierkin, if you've read Space is the Place by John Swed, if you spent time on the Saturn mailing list, shout out Saturn, you would have heard the name Tillman Stahl, who was one of the, kind of original researchers that tried to document this stuff. So we're going to start there and what he knew about Song of the Stargazers. And my bookmark just fell out, which is great. So now I got to find my spot again. And in the background, we're listening to Song of the Stargazers. All right, so according to Stahl, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to read it. I don't have fancy screenshots and stuff like that. Entry number 22 in his discography, Song of the Stargazers, Saturn 6161 NMY LP 487 was the catalog number and the etched into the runout grooves. What we knew in 83, recorded in 1961, Sun Club, Chicago. Songs being The Others in Their World, Somewhere Out, Distant Stars, Duo, 7 Points, Cosmo Dance, Galactic Synthesis, in parentheses, Song of the Stargazers. And the lineup at the time was purported to be Sun Ra on keyboards, John Gilmore tenor sax, Marshall Allen flute, Pat Patrick baritone sax, Ronnie Boykins bass, possibly Edward Skinner on drums, and then unknown trombone and trumpet. This is, in parentheses, according to Hartmut Gierkin. So we can assume that at the time Tillman Stahl was taking his information from Mr. Gierkin, and that he may not have heard the album at that time. So the mystery starts. We're going to go to Earthly Recordings of Sun Ra by Professor Robert L. Campbell and Christopher Trent, thank you, sirs, for all of your hard work. This came out, I believe, in the late 90s, this edition. And as you see, I've covered it in library cover to try and preserve it from falling to pieces, because as you can see, I've spent a lot of time over the last 20 years with this book. So the second discographical reference to Song of the Stargazers, which is playing in the background, and actually the first song that we're hearing right now is Cosmo Dance, is entry 135 in Earthly Recordings of Sun Ra, Campbell and Trent. Song of the Stargazers picks up most of the personnel from Tilmanstall's entry, but adds Robert Cummings, bass clarinet, Ali Hassan, Charles Stevens, Bernard Pettyway, Danny Ray Thompson, and others, Art Jenkins, familiar Arkestra members. And here, 1961 has changed to live 1967 or 68. The first song being Cosmo Dance. And what Campbell and Trent say here is this is a late 60s number. The bass clarinet is not Elo Omo. Personnel identified by Robert L. Campbell and Larry Nye, or Nay. Forgive me, Larry, for mispronouncing your name. Saturn LP 487, Song of the Stargazers, was the last new Saturn release on the Chicago label. It was issued before 1981, but most likely 1979. Some copies bear the serial number 6161 NMY. Mark Webber calls it a mystery album. Mark Webber is only beginning to tell a part of the story, I think. So we'll get to a little deeper dive on this later, but issued before 81, most likely 79. We're moving on to the second track, The Others in Their World, which sounds a lot more like Sun Ra keyboard, but I'm not sure that's Sun Ra's touch. Definitely influenced by Sun Ra, but that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of here. I think you can kind of see where I'm going with this. The next entry, 137, Realm of Lightning. Nope, that's not it. Sorry. I'm gonna go ahead here to the late 70s. Here we go. Song of the Stargazers. This makes up entries 289 through 292. And Mr. Campbell and Mr. Trent have added a lot more identification of the individuals that are playing on this. Songs in particular on 289, The Others in Their World and Galactic Synthesis. So The Others in Their World is what's playing now. 79 sounds possible. Sounds possible. Hope you can hear that. I don't want it to be too loud, but and here's the entry. The only known LP copies are in Europe. Maybe Saturn produced it in a very limited edition and they sold it while touring through Europe, according to Hart McKirkin. And all known copies are defective. Julian Vine says that the LP may have been mastered on only one stereo channel. And I'm listening, and I'm in the sweet spot of stereo speakers, and this is a stereo recording. The copy that we're listening to was originated from the Saturn mailing list, was traded around back in the day on cassette. So this would purportedly be LP to cassette, and then in the digital age, my good friend DZ remastered it, and that's what we're listening to now. But as others have mentioned, there's no vinyl noise to be heard on this. And there's no vinyl noise on the original cassette. And it's not mastered defectively or in a stereo channel, but it does have telltale signs of being cassette sourced. So Cosmo Dance, when that first came on, you heard what sounded like, if you had cassettes back in the day, sounded like when your cassette got chewed a little bit by your car stereo, and it was a little bit crinkly and low in volume, and then it would slowly kind of fade in and correct itself as it got to the better part of the tape. That first song, let's listen to it again. Cosmo Dance. Oh, not Cosmo Dance. What is it? There it is. The Others in Their World. Tapis. Hear that? It sounds like a chewed tape. So, only known copies in Europe. Maybe Saturn produced it in Chicago for sale only in Europe on tour. Only 3 copies are known to be in existence. One of those is in the collection of Hart McGeerkin. The other 2 are held by an unknown, to me anyway, Italian collector. So the pictures of the cover that we have from Omniverse Sun-Ra, I believe would be sourced from Hartmut, as well as the images of the label. And then circulated, presumably taped from the album. But there's no vinyl noise. So Chicago Saturn's, traditionally, from what I understood, pretty noisy pressings, especially in such a low quantity as would have been produced for this, then shipped overseas. You would think that we would be hearing some pops and crackles more than tapis, but anyway, I digress. We're going down the rabbit hole here together. All right, so to continue from Campbell. These particular items seem to be from the same live concert and are similar in sound and conception of the free improvisations of the Soundscape Sessions November '79. The first discographical listing came from Tillman Stahl, who we just read, who apparently took the misleading title The Others in Their World, which is not the 1960 Sun-Ra composition, and the serial number 6161 indicate that the album was recorded in Chicago in 1961, exclamation point. Well, Tillman Stahl, being a good discographer and detective, would have naturally done that, because that's how a lot of the earlier Sun-Ra catalog numbers were given. They were in relation to the year that the session was recorded. So for Stahl to make that judgment would be natural, and to make that deduction that the songs that he probably hadn't heard were for 1961 from the Sun Club, which is what it says on the label. See how this is kind of confusing and inconsistent, even in the realm of Sun-Ra releases, which are very inconsistent. It's not making sense to me. But let's see if we can add a little bit more here. The other tune that the other songs that Campbell talks about are Somewhere Out, what we'll play right now, which would be a unusual solo Sun-Ra piano piece recorded anywhere between mid-1960s and late 70s. Does that sound like any other Sun-Ra that you've heard? We'll run through the songs later. It seems to be inspired by, but it doesn't have Sun-Ra's touch. it doesn't have Sun Ra's harmonic, complex harmonic structure as far as I'm hearing it. It sounds like if I sat down at the piano and wanted to play something that sounded like Sun Ra, that would sound like, but it's too mannered and too considered and self-conscious for Sun Ra. It doesn't seem as fluid and spontaneous. The other song being Distant Stars, fragment from a live concert in 1970s. No connection with the 60 to 61 composition Distant Stars. This is sounds like it could be choreographer's workshop. I don't know. Studio recording, probably 1970s, entry 292, duo and 7 points. These two numbers feature the same percussionist played in a manner that is unusual for orchestra members. I agree with this. On 7 points, they contribute some vocalizing as well. Doesn't sound like the kind of vocalizing that we know the orchestra for. 7 points as a title is reminiscent of Place of 5 Points, which was recorded in 79. The percussionists are in fact Ataka Tune, Odun, and Chai. Again, sorry. A recording date in 72 or 73 is most likely. All right, even vinyl, even tapists, remove generations. This is not the sonics or the style of 72 to 73 Arkestra, in my opinion. There's no polyrhythm. There's a lack of complexity and an abundance of structure, for lack of a better word. But I'm digressing here. So that's Campbell, and then the last thing that I'm gonna read here is Art Yard's beautiful reprinting of Omniverse Sun Ra, which was originally released in 1,000 copies by Hart McGuirkin, Wait a While Press in the mid-90s or so, long out of print. Went to insane amounts to buy an original copy, and thankfully Art Yard, among the other many treasures that they've released to us, released Omniverse Sun Ra, which I believe is still in print and available. The last time I looked at Forced Exposure, you could still get it. It's beautifully printed and beautifully bound, and worth every penny. The reproduction quality on the photos is beautiful. It's been expanded from Hartmutt's original kind of album-sized version. There are a lot more photos, there are a lot more articles, and the reproductions of the album covers, I'd say, are improved and larger. And Chris Trent's discography in here, revised discography, is fantastic. It's comprehensive, but it's also concise and makes for great reading. I can't say enough good things about this book. But you should really have Earthly Recordings and Omniverse Sun Ra, as well as John Swed's book. And there are a bunch of others. Maybe we can talk books some other time. But Song of the Stargazers, Chris Trent, page 203. Sun Ra and his Myth Science Arkestra. That's duo, 7 points. He goes through the suggested collective personnel, which is continues to build on Stahl and Campbell and Trent's previous work. And here's his commentary. A Saturn LP, released probably around 1979. The matrix markings are, as we talked about previously, the matrix numbers are mechanically stamped, unusual for a post-1950s Saturn album. The center label is Chicago Saturn style. And I've got some pictures. I found online. And yes, it is a Chicago Saturn style. But as we've seen with the Scorpio reissues, etc., those can be replicated. So I don't think that that's a definitive marker of whether this is actually a Sun Ra Arkestra record. Only a few copies are known, all in Europe. First documented in Hart McGuirkin's, 1982 discography, and then Stahl in 83. The provenance of this album is very obscure. Repeated listening makes it even more puzzling, which is totally true. So I've been listening to this album for probably about 20 years now, and just this past year have kind of come to the feeling that I have. And I'm not saying it quite outright, but I think you know where I'm going. The usual Arkestra musicians are not readily identifiable by ear on this album, which has led to suggestions that it is actually by a different band altogether. I think that's entirely possible. The personnel listed above is a best effort based on the premise that this record is what it says it is, a late 70s Arkestra album. Now remember that Mr. Trent is working in conjunction, adding commentary to a book that Hart McGuirkin originally released and is the co-author of. And as far as I understand, all the original information about this record would have been sourced from Mr. Gierkin. So I think Chris is being very even in his assessment here, which I'm trying to be as well, because I have the utmost respect for Mr. Gierkin, but I have some other thoughts around that that I'll talk about later. So one of the tracks, Cosmo Dance, is in fact Salah Ragab's composition Cleopatra with a K. So for those of you who don't know, Salah Ragab, Egyptian drummer who was a friend of Hart McGuirkin, befriended Sun Ra and the Arkestra when they went to Egypt for the first time in 1971 with the help of Hart McGuirkin, and played live shows there, as well as saw the sights of Egypt, which must have been an incredibly profound dream come true for Sonny and the band. They went back again, and I think, well, definitely 84, and I believe that they met up again with those gentlemen, and Salah Ragab, forgive me if I'm getting the name wrong, and actually played some concerts together. So it's a known association, and Salah was known to be a fan of Sun Ra's music and play somewhat in the style of the Arkestra. So I think that it's entirely a possibility that perhaps at least Cleopatra is Salah Ragab's band. And as you might recall, Leo Records / Golden Years released a CD in the 2000s, I think, that was a reissue of something that came out in the 80s, but basically it was a Salah Ragab big band record billed as Sun Ra, but Sun Ra might have guested on one song. I might be incorrect, but again, you kind of get the point. One of the tracks, Cosmo Dance, is in fact Salah Ragab's composition Cleopatra with a K. Sun Ra did not meet Salah Ragab before his 1971 visit to Egypt, so this track can't really have been recorded in the 1960s. Can't have been recorded in the 1960s, not 1961 at the Sun Club. This track is recorded at a live concert from a microphone placed close to the front of the audience, who don't sound like a typical American audience of 1970s, meaning that there's polite clapping for each solo. They're largely quiet. There's no club noise. There's no hooting and hollering. The track has potentially identifiable but elusive soloists. The flute is not Marshall Allen. Oboe, bass, clarinet are not John Gilmore and Elo Omo. 2 tracks feature percussion only. played by just 2 or 3 musicians with vocal interjections in the latter track. Somewhere Out is a piano solo, but it doesn't sound quite like Sun Ra's work, and I agree. Stylistic fingerprints are absent. Left and right hand interdependence, polyrhythm, and harmonic, completely unique chord phrasing, inversions, and harmony being, I think, what we're talking about here. Compared to the solo piano work of Aurora Borealis, or the free improvisations of piano recital from Venice, which are of the same period. I think what Trent's trying to say here is listen and judge for yourself. The pieces titled The Others in Their World and Galactic Synthesis, Song of the Stargazers, bear no relation to similarly named compositions. They are conducted ensemble improvisations with written ensemble material embedded. Soloists are a puzzle, and the solos cannot be readily attributed to John Gilmore or Marshall Allen. And I thought that this discussion was actually going to be easier and have a bit more clarity. But when have you ever thought or heard that in relation to John Gilmore or Marshall Allen? Every time either of those masters picked up an instrument, they were immediately identifiable by their tone, by their phrasing, by their touch, and by the largely kind of what I would call, and this applies to the entire orchestra, Sun Ra as well, it would be a food analogy. Everything that band touched, the way that they touched it, was omniversal, meaning their tone is sweet and sour, salty and sweet, that umami thing, where even the most beautiful solo has a certain bite and edge to it. It's bittersweet, and a lot of musicians don't have that. So when have you ever heard an orchestra record that you can listen to from beginning to end? And let's see here. We're talking roughly a half an hour to 40-minute record here. When have you ever been able to listen to an orchestra record from beginning to end and not say, that's Sonny, that's John, that's Marshall, whoever? They're undeniable. So the fact that the performances on this record are so veiled, regardless of the mystery behind it, I think is very telling. Okay, so that's the discographical kind of background that we have, and I'm not going to reach a conclusion here. I'm just sharing the study, and I hope that in the comments you guys chip in with your own take on it. And I would really love to learn more, but I don't think we're ever going to find a consensus, and I don't think we're ever going to have an answer. And I think the more that I listen to and ponder this, that's intentional. Matthew mentions the electric guitar. Yeah, and if I kind of infer what you're saying here with electric guitar, is that the electric guitar tone and the way that it's played is perhaps also inconsistent with other orchestra work, and what's being played right now is a great indicator. Doesn't quite sound like any electric guitar from the orchestra. But again, so I think that part of this mystery is intentional. Some call me Mr. Ra, some call me Mystery, some call me Mr. Mystery. That's part of the directive of Sun Ra. Song of the Stargazers. A stargazer is an astronomer, an astrologer, but a stargazer is a daydreamer who looks for distant worlds. And the way that I'm approaching this, I asked Matthew, this question earlier. Have you seen the documentaries about the Toynbee tiles called, the name's escaping me, but it's The Mystery of the Toynbee Tiles. I want to say, I got to look it up because it's one of the most incredible documentaries ever. You should see it. The Toynbee Tiles documentary and the Institute documentary. I'm approaching this idea along that line, meaning that Toynbee tiles, resurrect dead Toynbee tiles, regardless, watch it. It's magical. It's a great mystery, but it kind of reminds me of this, meaning that it is, Song of the Stargazers is real in some respect. Is it the Sun Ra Arkestra? Well, that is questionable, right? I don't think we have a definitive answer. But part of the fun of it is the mystery, and part of being a stargazer is to not trust and accept what you've been told, but to look deeper and listen deeper. And the Toynbee tiles were works of art in a linoleum tile form that were embedded into the crosswalks of North America, primarily the eastern seaboard of North America, I believe late 70s to 80s. And they had messages in them that were somewhat cryptic, that revolved around the 2001 planet Jupiter, but they were clues and enticers to make you think harder, to stick with you. The Institute, which has inspired a new AMC fictional series, is a documentary about an urban art project game mystery that makes people that live in urban areas, that walk back and forth to work, staring at the sidewalk, take notice of their surroundings, think deeper, and see the magic and mystery in life that is there that we ignore. And it creates a sense of heightened awareness and a game. So to go all conspiracy theorist on you, and inject this sense of fun and mystery into this question, what if this artifact, this Song of the Stargazers, was intentionally placed within the myth and the discography for us to reckon with, to look deeper at, to think about? I'm not purporting that there's been any dishonesty or deceit. I have the utmost respect for all the individuals that have documented this record. But what if, as cosmic gestures in the tradition of Sun Ra himself, a product, an album, was manufactured and inserted into the myth that, other than the song titles, which are very close to and sound like they could be orchestra titles, what if the whole thing is kind of a MacGuffin? And it was done in a joyful, cosmic gesture intention. I'm not saying that's true. I'm not saying I have all the clues, that I put it all together, but the more I think about this, the more that it crosses my mind. And we'll talk about a little bit more why. So we've talked about the discography. I'm going to flip around here and forgive the pirate radio aspect of this. But if we go on Discogs, Song of the Stargazers, there's 3 reviews here and 2 releases of this album, right? So the two releases would be the original purported L Saturn 6161 487 1979, And then thanks to my friend Matthew, my new friend Matthew, I learned today, or really ingested today, that this album was also put out unofficially by a label called Comet Meta in Italy, and it was in a limited press on vinyl of 11 copies. Right? So Song of the Stargazers, the original as reported by Gearkin and Stahl, 3 known copies. One to someone with a name that we know within the community, the other 2 to a quote-unquote unknown Italian collector. And then a unofficial release limited to 11 copies. So someone went to great trouble and zero profit to do this. Which again kind of only deepens the mystery. So the first review, Chillinist. Part of the debate over this album is whether it's actually Sun Ra and the Arkestra at all. To my ears, it doesn't sound like them. I should note that I've never seen the LP. Oh, okay. Interesting, Peter. I just have a cassette dub, which is suspiciously free of vinyl noise. Take my 2 cents. So that's very similar to what I said previously. Here's another review. Wonderfully odd record, one of the most debated in terms of provenance. It said Campbell and Trent that all copies are defective, as we talked about before. What I'm listening to here, my cassette dub of the album, is not. The music on both the quote-unquote original pressing and the unofficial pressing are the same, and they're from the same source. They both share the same, what I hear is cassette tape artifacts, or at the very least tape artifacts. Sounds, Lester Molecule says here, sounds fine to me, no weirder than any Ra titles. And again, he only has a CD copy of a vinyl rip. He says it's one of his favorite Saturns, pointing out that it's a mystery album. I'm hoping against hope it gets a proper release soon. Which would amaze me if it ever did, and I've intentionally not asked the current Sun Ra Archive and LLC about this album, because I want to maintain the mystery for a little while longer, but I don't think that they're going to be releasing it. But I could be wrong. And then so there were 3 reviews here. Where's the third? 1 through 3 of 3. Huh. No doubt LP exists. 11 people have it. If your copy is without any vinyl noise, most probably it is not an LP. That's Krupelman. Well, yeah. But all copies come from vinyl, which makes that statement very, very confusing. All right, so this is the cover from the reissue via my friend Matt. Thank you very much. Song of the Stargazers. This looks nothing like any other Sun Ra album ever known to be released from a graphic design standpoint. It appears to be using a stock photograph, has professionally typeset type knocked out of an image, and this little person standing there stargazing. I mean, does that have any other precedent or comparison within the Sun Ra discography? It's kind of weird, right? It doesn't look anything like any other Saturn ever. So via Discogs, this is in a plain white sleeve. So if we know of 3 original copies and this was the cover, then that means it was a paste on to a generic white sleeve with a middle hole. Doesn't look like it the way that it's framed out here graphically. This appears to be an original copy. It's been worn. There's crinkles on it. The sides are the corners are meticulously aged, quote unquote aged. I don't know. The aging on this photograph is not the same on the corners. Pretty weird. So this is the inner label that is based on the late Chicago design. L. Saturn presents Sun Ra and his Myth Science Orchestra playing Song of the Stargazers. Side A, 6161, Sun Club. Is there another Saturn record that has an identifier like that in that spot in all caps? Sun Club. It's not a catalog number. It has no relationship to song publishing. If I'm going to go down that rabbit hole, that this is a fun game and that there's something to be learned from this, that sticks out like a sore thumb to me. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then the typesetting of these tiny compositions that seem to be sandwiched in to the space. If you're a graphic designer or kind of graphic sensibility, even these paste up older style productions, something's just not ringing for me. Oh, the other thing too is, a lot of the handmade Saturns, so some of the inner labels would have been cut out by hand and pasted in, as this one has been. So there's some attention to detail there, but then the inner grooves are mechanically stamped instead of hand etched. Strange. Back cover definitely kind of mimics the Saturn style with Sun Ra's poetry. But if this is 1979, were they still doing poems solely on the back cover with no song titles, no musician credits, nothing other than the L. Saturn address, and then red marker only, no multicolor marker? It looks very considered to me. And I guess I've kind of let go of holding back on my questioning of this. So this is the label as shown in the original Omniverse, Hart McGuirkin Omniverse, a little larger detail. But as is seen by the all the marks on this, it looks like a photocopy. So was the label photocopied, or was the label actually on the record a photocopy and then pasted on, or is this a photocopy of the actual record? And if you owned the record, would you photocopy it or photograph it? Not really sure. So thanks to Matthew, this is the label for the unauthorized repress of it, the 11-copy vinyl repress, which makes no attempt to replicate a Saturn. But interesting nonetheless. And then I would assume that this is the back cover of the reissue, but it could be it could be an insert as well. But there was another insert included in it, so I'm led to believe that this is probably the back cover of the reissue. So again, it's the poems but no song listings. So if we look at the insert with the reissue, it lists the songs, it lists the musicians, and basically this is picking up on Campbell and Trent's notes. And I'm skimming it really quick to see if there's anything that wasn't stated earlier. So the last line, Mr. Castelli in the early 90s, I remember seeing those. I asked Robin, one was sold to a collector in Austria, while he can't remember where the other one was sent. Whew. Okay, so that's everything that I have printed about this. All right, so let's just listen for a sec a little bit more closely. And I'll tell you, I just want to tell you what I'm hearing here. So according to Earthly Recordings 2. This is 1967 Cosmo Dance. So it's got the ambience of a hall, larger space, tile floor, probably. You hear coughing, so there's an audience. It doesn't sound, I mean, it's not choreographer's workshop. Bass clarinet. Even in a discipline piece, that doesn't sound like a Sun Ra interval to me. And the tonguing and the tone of the bass clarinet is very mannered and very polite. Does it sound like a Sun Ra melody? Nope. That percussion is very steady. It's very consistent rhythmically, and it's not in counterpoint to the music. So when you see the footage of the Arkestra playing percussion, someone like a Marshall Allen, they're always playing usually a very strong counterpoint, meaning they're playing against the rhythm of the rest of the band, creating this polyrhythmic wash. The orchestra didn't play this straight. This is Cleopatra. This is the Salah Ragab song. So Sun Ra wouldn't have covered him. So, all right. Others in Their World, 1979. Tape is all chewed up. Lots of tape hiss. No vinyl noise. Organ, Krumar organ sound. Peter Denon says that's the Cairo Jazz Band for sure. Why would Sun Ra have put them on a Saturn album? Unless Alton Abraham was releasing a Saturn or a Salah Ragab Cairo Jazz Band album. So yes, at first blush, this sounds like it could be Sun Ra, that Krumar organ sound. You know, that kind of spinning palms thing. But it doesn't have the abandon and the omniversal cacophony. Again, it sounds too polite and considered and mannered. And the harmonies of the horns behind it when they came in are very conventional. That trumpet, very sweet and polite to me, right? It doesn't have the gliss and the inflection of Michael Ray in 1979. He would be in the high, overblown range. Oh, we're getting some comments here, which is nice. So Matthew's saying this reminds him of the Hart McGurk and John Chai Kabul Tehran tapes. So if you listen to the saxophones. Inspired by Sun Ra? Absolutely. That guitar sound? Picking out those single notes? I can't think of any equal in the Sun Ra catalog. Galactic Synthesis. This again, 1979. Live. Drums, swell, definitely as the vibe of the orchestra. The orchestra saxophonist had so much more fire and power and variety to their tone. With no disrespect to these musicians, I mean, it's engaging, entertaining music, but it sounds like to me it sounds like if I was going to record a tribute to Sun Ra album, what I would be capable of, not being a master musician of the caliber of the orchestra. There's no fire and ice, there's no sweet and sour, there's no sweet and salty, that kind of all-encompassing tone. Trombone. Oh man, they had way more fire. Tyrone, when those guys blew, they were blowing the sound of eternity with all of their spirit and all of their intention. Not that these musicians aren't trying to do that, but to be schooled and play in the orchestra, there was something innate where they didn't have to try to sound like the orchestra in Sun Ra. They were. And that's what I'm hearing in this music. Somewhere Out. This is the solo piano piece. Purports to be 1970. Yes. Sun Ra did that on Atlantis. It was far more impactful and unsettling. And words are failing me now to describe what I feel in the music. Nah. When Sun Ra did that, it would be like a desert wind that had been picking up for miles, blowing through your core. Those chord clusters, when he played them, were deadly. It sounds polite to me. I'm sorry, I'm going on. Whatever. I'm just trying to share. And I appreciate you guys sticking with me, and I really want to hear what you think. So we get a short tune here, Distant Stars. Percussion, stand-up bass, little piano noodling. It's kind of got some of the sonics, production quality of a Sun Ra record. And I think that's what's interesting about this production. So this tone, that's reminiscent of the Cosmic Tones for Mental Therapy drum sound. A bongo skin type drum being played by both hands and sticks in a reverberant, smaller rehearsal room. But listen. It's consistent. It's easy to identify rhythmically what's happening. There's no polyrhythm. There's none of that multi-layer stuff going on with the orchestra, where you can listen and each player is contributing to the whole, but they're playing a completely unique counterpoint part. Right, so this song's like about 3 minutes long, and it maintains the same pace, the same point or intention throughout the whole thing, which I'm not sure a Sun Ra composition or song would do. There's no introduction of new ideas. It doesn't move any place. And again, with no disrespect to the musicians, I'm just trying to provide some commentary on what I'm hearing here to really question whether this is really the Sun Ra Orchestra or whether this is an Easter egg that's been planted. Again, the potential sonics of a Saturn album, but this is not a rhythmic idea that Sun Ra, it sounds like Sun Ra would have explored, right? And so a bongo type tune drum played with sticks. You know, if this is choreographer's workshop and the acoustics seem to kind of mimic that, there would be Tommy Hunter tape delay on this. There will be some kind of added something that creates the carnival mirror effect, something that warps your perception and your sensibility. Yes, Matthew, very linear, which Sun Ra was not. He would twist your mind and twist your expectations, even in a 3-minute song. Where it started would not be where it ended. 1979, Others in Their World. So we're through the whole thing now. That's all the songs in the order of their recording, not in the order that they were on the album in. So thanks for going along on the ride with me. I wanted to share this because I've been thinking about it. I've been listening a lot, and I love this idea of magic and mystery, and the idea, and I could be crazy, but whatever, that this could be a game, that this could be a cosmic joke that's been in plain sight, included in the Sun Ra discography since 1982 or 1983, that only 1 or 2 or 3 people originally ever saw or held, and then after that, repressed in limited quantities, only 11 people have. And all of the versions sound very similar sonically. There's no variance from tape to vinyl. One version doesn't have the tape artifacts, another does. They're very consistent, so they all sound like they're from the same source. And it's clearly compiled from different recording sessions, different recording environments, different recording ensembles, which Sun Ra certainly did. But where I'm at right now, after having listened to this for the past 20 years or so, and reading about it and thinking about it, is that this is not the Sun Ra Orchestra. And I would argue that, there's not even orchestra members guesting on here. And again, I could be wrong, but I think I've put in my 10,000 hours. This is completely intuitive, right? But that's where I stand on it. And having seen the Institute documentary recently, and thinking about Toynbee tiles, and thinking about the joy in a puzzle and a mystery, and mystery being inherent to Sun Ra, I can't help but wonder, as a Sun Ra fan, as a premier Sun Ra fan, I said earlier in my video, one of the greatest honors of my life, has been able to do liner notes for a couple records and see my name on a Sun Ra album. What if you were a musician documenting another musician, a highly mysterious, thoughtful, mystical, hard to decipher musician? Were a musician yourself, and you inserted a piece of you and your mystery into the mystery to be found at a later date. What a great idea. What a great game. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying that's where my mind went with this. Call me crazy. Tell me I'm wrong. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks for going along for the ride. And we'll be back with you, I'm sure, at some point, because I haven't left the house but once in 2 weeks, and I'm down the Sun Ra rabbit hole. And quite honestly, my family is healthy and safe, and I'm healthy and safe, and there's really nothing else that I'd rather be doing than listening to Sun Ra all day long and making these crazy dumb videos on Facebook, and hoping that even if there's 1 or 2 of you out there, and I know that you are, that are like me, that this gives you some kind of alternative entertainment to reruns of Big Bang Theory, or an alternative to CNN and all of that. So be well, space is the place. Keep gazing at the stars, stargazers in the sky. And please, comments, other videos, love to see your other content. But keep traveling the spaceways. Have a good day. Bye.